Amusement parks are safe. At least, that's what they tell us. But that isn't always true. These stories were hidden until now. I worked summers at a small amusement park called Fairhaven Park when I was 19. It was the type of place families visited to spend a lazy afternoon. Old rides, a mini golf course, cotton candy stalls, and a carousel at its center. Most rides were vintage, creaky, but charming, and the carousel was everyone's favorite. The carousel was genuinely beautiful, handcrafted in the 1920s, with painted horses that wore permanent smiles. But even then, something about it felt slightly off. Maybe it was the music's slow, old, crackly or the way the horses seemed to watch you. My job was simple: operate the rides, sell tickets, and help guests. Nothing unusual, nothing exciting, exactly what I wanted. But one evening changed everything. It was nearly closing time, and the park was practically empty. The carousel had just finished its last ride, and the final guests were trickling out. I turned off the ride, the cheerful music fading into silence, and began locking things up. Then, as I walked away, I heard a soft mechanical hum. Turning around, I saw the carousel spinning slowly, gently. I paused, confused. Maybe I'd forgotten to switch it off properly. Returning, I double-checked the panel. Everything was set correctly, switched off, and locked. But the carousel continued spinning. At first, I assumed it was some electrical fault or delayed reaction. It was an old machine, after all. But when it didn't stop after a full minute, I felt uneasy. The park lights dimmed as the timer shut them off automatically, leaving only the carousel's golden bulbs glowing softly, casting odd, elongated shadows. I stepped closer, feeling inexplicably nervous. From my position, the horses seemed to blur slightly, their smiles stretching into something less friendly. I shook my head, laughing at my nerves, and reached for my walkie-talkie to call security. Ecstatic greeted me. Annoyed, I walked to the park office. Maybe the maintenance guy, Rick, had stayed late and was playing a prank. The office was empty, but I found the main control panel and flipped the master switch, cutting power to the whole park. Every ride stopped, except the carousel. Now, fully uneasy, I hurried back. As I got closer, the carousel sped up, going faster than it ever should. The horses' smiling faces twisted grotesquely under the spinning lights, as if melting. The music started again, distorted and slow, each note drawn out painfully. My heart thumped loudly. I circled the ride cautiously, unsure of what to do. As it spun, a figure appeared, sitting on one of the horses. A child I'd never seen enter. I called out, "Hey, park's closed. You need to get off." The figure didn't respond, gripping the horse tightly as the carousel spun faster, impossibly faster, now almost a blur. "Hey," I shouted louder. "It's dangerous." No answer. I reached out instinctively to grab the child as it passed, but when my hand closed around the arm, it felt impossibly cold, brittle, like dry wood. I stumbled backward in horror, staring at my empty hand. There was no child, just painted horses spinning endlessly. Terrified, I ran toward the park gates, determined to leave. But halfway there, I heard laughter, soft, innocent, childlike laughter. It echoed oddly, following me as I ran. I turned briefly. The carousel had stopped, completely silent, completely dark. No lights, no music. I stopped running, breathing heavily, questioning my own sanity. Slowly, I walked back to it, the silence deafening. I stared at the horses, now frozen in time. Their painted smiles looked normal again. The twisted faces gone. I forced myself to check the ride thoroughly, searching for signs of malfunction or sabotage. Nothing. The next day, I reported it to the manager, Mr. Hardy. He looked concerned at first, then dismissed it as mechanical glitches. "Old machines," he said simply. "We'll get Rick to take a look." Rick never found anything wrong, but he gave me a strange look afterward. "You're not the first to say that," he whispered. "Some nights, it likes to run on its own. Best to just leave it alone." That was my last summer at Fairhaven. I tried to forget. Years later, I found an old newspaper article online. A child had disappeared at Fairhaven Park in 1934. Last seen, riding the carousel. No one ever found out what happened. The carousel was there when the park closed down years later. Rusted, forgotten, and dismantled, but some nights, former employees swear they still hear music. Soft, distant carousel music, playing faintly as if from nowhere. And sometimes, when the moon is high, they say the carousel spins again, inviting another rider to climb aboard. Every summer, my cousin Ryan and I would go to Fantasy Acres, a rundown amusement park just outside our hometown. It was a tradition, something we started back when we were kids, mostly because it was cheap and close by. Even as teenagers, we never stopped going. Maybe it was nostalgia or just the thrill of breaking minor rules. Whatever the reason, we never skipped our annual trip. Fantasy Acres wasn't exactly Disneyland. Most rides were rusty, poorly maintained, and run by bored teenagers. Yet the park had a certain charm to it, especially at night, when the faded lights gave everything a soft, eerie glow. We always stayed late, partly because it felt like we owned the place after dark. Our favorite ride was the Black Manor, a classic dark ride with cheap scares, plastic skeletons, and old animatronics that barely moved. It was mostly laughable, yet somehow Ryan and I made a point to write it every year. It became our private joke, the cheesy ride we secretly loved. Last July, something changed. We'd been in line for 20 minutes, laughing at how seriously some kids were taking the warnings about staying inside the ride vehicle. The kid operating the controls waved us forward with tired eyes, his voice flat as he reminded us, "Keep your arms inside and don't get out." Ryan rolled his eyes dramatically as we climbed into the scratched-up ride car. "Wow, terrifying advice," he joked. "Think someone actually got off before." We laughed as the ride jerked forward, taking us slowly into the darkness ahead. Immediately, the muffled screams, recorded howls, and clanking chains began their predictable assault on our ears. We knew every turn, every prop, every cheap jump scare. Yet, as we passed a familiar fake graveyard scene, I noticed something odd. One of the tombstones was knocked over, and a dark smudge stained the floor. It wasn't fake blood or paint. It looked fresh and real, like oil or something wet. Ryan must have noticed it too, because he leaned in, suddenly serious. "You see that?" he whispered. "Maybe someone did get out." I brushed him off. "It's probably just a broken prop. Relax." But the further we went, the more uneasy we became. The ride felt different. Some lights flickered more than usual, and certain sounds had stopped working entirely. Soon, the cheap scares gave way to silence, broken only by the creaking wheels beneath us. Then, the ride car jerked sharply and stopped dead in the middle of the track. For a second, we both sat still, waiting for it to start up again. Rides broke down all the time. Usually, someone came to fix it after a minute or two, but nothing happened. Ryan shifted nervously, laughing a bit too loud. Great timing. We waited another minute, then two. Still nothing. No workers came. No one shouted from outside. Just silence, punctuated by the ride's quiet hum and creaking of the rails. "Maybe we should get out," Ryan said, finally. "You heard the kid," I joked weakly. "Stay inside." "Come on," Ryan sighed. "We can't stay here forever." Before I could protest, Ryan climbed out, his sneakers echoing against the wooden track. Reluctantly, I followed him. My heart raced as we carefully stepped between the rails, moving toward a faint red emergency light we saw glowing ahead. As we walked, our shadows stretched eerily across the walls. It felt wrong being here, like we were backstage in a play, seeing something forbidden. We reached the emergency exit door, but it wouldn't budge. Ryan cursed under his breath, rattling the handle with frustration. "It's locked," he whispered. "Great safety. Now what?" I asked, genuinely nervous. Ryan didn't answer. Instead, he pointed toward something further along the tracker's small service door, slightly ajar. A dim blue light seeped through the opening. Without speaking, we moved toward it. I could feel the temperature drop slightly as we approached, an odd chill seeping into the air. Ryan pushed the door gently. It creaked open, revealing a hidden maintenance area place park visitors were never supposed to see. Cables, broken props, and paint buckets littered the floor. But there was something else, too. In the far corner, barely illuminated by the flickering blue light, sat a second ride car. It was rusted, older than ours, covered in dust as if abandoned long ago. But what caught our attention wasn't the car itself, was the shape slumped in its seat. A figure, unmoving, dressed in the faded remains of a park uniform. Ryan whispered nervously, "Is that a prop?" I stepped closer, feeling the hairs on my neck rise as I did. My voice trembled as I answered, "Doesn't look like one." Just as the words left my mouth, something in the figure moved. It wasn't much, just a slight twitch of its head, barely noticeable. But it was enough to freeze me in place. Ryan whispered urgently, "We need to leave now." But before we could even step back, the figure lurched violently forward. It was fast, unnaturally fast, stumbling toward us with jerky, broken movements. Its face was obscured in shadows, but we heard a wet, guttural moan escape it. We ran. Panic surged through my body, adrenaline overtaking any rational thought. We raced back along the track, stumbling blindly in the darkness. I could hear it following us, its heavy steps thumping heavily against the wooden track behind us. We burst through the fake cemetery, nearly slipping on the dark smudge we'd seen earlier, now clearly blood. My lungs burned as we sprinted back toward the ride car we'd abandoned. Miraculously, the emergency lights flickered on, and the ride suddenly jerked back to life, motors grinding into action. We dove back into our car, holding each other tightly as the vehicle moved forward, resuming its slow mechanical path as if nothing had happened. When we emerged into the station, we must have looked terrified. The board operator looked at us strangely as we hurried off, breathless and shaking. "Enjoy the ride?" he asked dryly. We didn't answer. We ran straight out of the park, not daring to look back. Later, we learned a worker had gone missing in that ride years ago. Fantasy Acres had quietly sealed that story away, covering up the disappearance as a simple quitting incident. The ride had operated normally ever since. Ryan and I never returned. I still dream about that dark ride sometimes, about stepping off the tracks, about the hidden room and about the figure that waited motionless in the dark. Now, every amusement park feels different. Because I know one simple truth. Some rides aren't meant for fun. They're traps, waiting silently for someone foolish enough to get off. We took Daniel to Willow Glen Fun Park last summer. My wife, my son, and I. It wasn't a fancy place. No fireworks shows, no elaborate animatronics or licensed characters walking around. Just a fading local park clinging to the edges of its heyday, hidden behind a two-lane highway and thick rows of pine trees. It had that smell, a mixture of fried dough, sunblock, and old metal baking under the sun. The kind of place where the merry-go-round still played warped organ music, and the safety signs were so sun-bleached they barely showed red anymore. But it was cheap, and Daniel was 6. At that age, you don't need much more than cotton candy and a ride that spins in circles. We were finishing our 3rd loop through the park when Daniel spotted it. "Daddy," he said, tugging on my hand. "Why can't we go there?" I looked in the direction he pointed and saw a section of the park cordoned off by a tall, temporary wooden wall, half covered in peeling paint and faded tarps. A crooked sign read, "Maintenance, do not enter." Behind it, just barely visible through gaps in the planks, were shadows of forgotten attractions. A rusted swing ride, a broken snack stand with a sun-warped awning, a line of torn flags fluttering weakly. "That part's closed," I told him. "They don't use it anymore, but someone's in there," Daniel said. That made me pause. "What do you mean?" He pointed. "That balloon. It moved." Sure enough, a red balloon bobbed slowly near the top of the fence, rising just high enough to be seen, then sinking again, like something was letting it go, pulling it back, over and over. I exchanged a glance with my wife. She gave me a quiet shrug, probably a trick of the wind. But Daniel stared hard. Later that day, while my wife went to grab snacks, I let Daniel ride the mini train that looped through the park's outer path. It circled twice. On the 3rd round, as I waited by the station, Daniel didn't return. The train came back with one empty seat. My heart stuttered. I rushed to the operator, a teenager in a faded vest, but he barely looked up from his phone. "Kid must have hopped off," he mumbled. I shouted his name, checked the nearby rides, ran through the food court. Nothing. Then I saw it again. The balloon. It floated just beyond that wooden barrier, bouncing softly. I didn't think. I ran. The wooden panels weren't nailed down, just leaned against each other like an afterthought. They fell away easily as I pushed through. Inside was a graveyard of rides. A Ferris wheel, missing half its seats. A small roller coaster covered in vines. Old signage with smiling cartoon faces faded into ghostly outlines. The air smelled of rust and mildew. And somewhere deeper inside, I heard it. Laughter. Soft. familiar. I sprinted toward the sound, heart hammering. "Daniel," I shouted. "Daddy," came the reply, distant but clear. I turned a corner and saw him, standing near an old tower ride with yellowing glass panels. He was talking to someone inside the ride's control booth. His face lit up in that way only kids do. He says, "I can ride it." Daniel beamed. I stopped cold. Inside the booth, barely visible through the grime-streaked glass, was a figure, unmoving, watching. "Come here," I said firmly. "Now." But now. Daniel stepped away from the platform reluctantly. I grabbed his hand, but not before glancing into the booth one last time. The figure didn't move, but I saw just enough. He wore a faded Willow Glen uniform. Pale skin, eyes sunken and wrong. Not hostile, just hollow. Then the speaker crackled. "He wants to ride," it whispered. Not static, not a recording. A voice. I didn't speak. I just turned and pulled Daniel with me. Behind us, machinery screeched. I looked back once. The ride, abandoned for years, had begun to move. Slowly, lurching, the metal groaned like something waking from sleep. The booth's interior lit up in a sickly green, like old emergency lights. And as we ran, I swear I heard the balloons again. Dozens of them, squeaking in the air, bobbing as if tugged by invisible hands. We didn't stop until we were outside the barrier again. I told my wife we were going home. I didn't explain. Daniel didn't say a word the entire drive back. That night, he drew pictures. He used to draw dragons, race cars, astronauts. That night, it was a ride tower, a control booth, a man with no mouth, and a red balloon. The next morning, I called the park's office. I asked about the closed section. The woman on the line hesitated, then said, "That area's been sealed off since the incident." What incident? But she hung up. I searched online, dug through forums, archives, old news clippings, and I found it. In 2003, a ride operator named Greg Lorden died inside that same booth. Heart failure, they said. But the story got buried. No media coverage, no public acknowledgement from the park. An old blog mentioned his ghost, still seen by kids. Weeks passed. Daniel stopped talking about the park, but he kept drawing balloons. And last night, just before bed, he whispered. He said, "I could ride next time." Just me. I haven't slept since.